Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I recently posted a few vlogs of our trip to Disney World that we took in June of 2022. We went with our family of four, our older daughter who is, well, she's 9 now, she was 8 at the time of the trip. And then this was also our first time ever taking a baby. We took our 5-month-old daughter, and a lot of our families and friends told us that we were crazy. And I was a little nervous, but it was honestly okay. So I'm making this video in case you want some tips on, things that we found that worked on our trip. And also if anyone's on the fence about bringing a baby, if you're prepared, it was totally worth it. And we made memories that we'll never forget. And I'm so glad that we didn't listen to everybody and we took her. So there are 4 areas that were kind of the big things that I was worried about when I was planning this trip. The first thing was nursing. I was nervous about finding places to nurse. Would it be too hot, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit. The next thing is rider switch. And there's not really advice about this, but I just want to make sure the information is out there if you don't know about it. You can still ride all the big rides, even if you bring a baby with you. You just kind of have to take turns. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit. The next thing that was a big factor thinking about planning our trip was nap times, because I know if the baby doesn't sleep, if the baby doesn't get enough nap time, everybody's miserable sometimes. So that's a huge factor. You want to make sure that the baby gets enough sleep. And then the last thing that I wanted to talk about was some of the essentials, I would say, the equipment, the things that we brought that helped with having a baby. I mean, other than the obvious stuff, but there were just a couple extra things we brought that we thought were really helpful. So as far as nursing goes, I feel like this was even harder given the fact that we were there in June. The heat definitely made it harder, but it wasn't too bad. Like, we made it work. The first thing I want to talk about are the baby care centers. Every park has a baby care center. Usually they're near like the first aid station, and they're really nice. It's just a nice, quiet, air-conditioned place that you can go, and you can, there's nursing rooms, there are like changing tables. They even have some things you can buy, like if you run out of diapers or wipes or something like that, they have those available there. So super helpful. It was awesome. The problem we had was every time we needed one and we needed to nurse her, we were like a mile away on the other side of the park. That happened almost every time. During the entire trip, which was 9 days long, I only used the baby care center 2 times. So I had to find, another way to kind of deal with everything. So one of the things I did was every time we sat down for a meal, and usually that would be inside. Every once in a while we would eat outside somewhere, but every time we sat for a meal, I would feed her. I kind of got really good at feeding her with one hand and eating with the other. So those were good times to feed her. And then because of rider switch, which I'll talk about in a minute, a lot of times half of our group would be riding one of the big rides, and I just had to wait with the baby anyway. So that was a perfect time to go find a place to feed her. And usually that wasn't too hard to find a quiet place. It wasn't always inside, unfortunately, but I could usually at least find a place in the shade. So I'm going to go through each park really quick and just kind of talk about some of the places, the rides, the attractions that were good places to feed the baby. I would say Magic Kingdom and Epcot, the baby can go on a lot of the rides, and a lot of them are long, they're dark, some of them aren't too loud. Luckily, at 5 months old, she wasn't quite at the point yet where she was getting really distracted and looking around all the time. Now at 7 months, I do feel like it would be harder. She gets distracted by everything now. But a couple months ago, it wasn't so bad. But at Animal Kingdom and Hollywood Studios, it was, there's not as many rides that the baby can ride, and they're definitely not rides that you can really feed her on anyway. Magic Kingdom, there are quite a few rides and attractions that worked for feeding the baby. I fed the baby on Pirates. I actually fed her while we were walking through the line, and then we boarded, and then I finished feeding her once we were on the ride. It's nice and cool and dark, like the entire queue for Pirates, so that was a good one. Another good one was the People Mover. It's a long ride. A lot of it is inside, or at least shaded and covered. Haunted Mansion was one that I tried to feed her on. It's not a super long ride though, so if your baby's really fast at eating, that would probably work. If it takes the baby a little longer, if they're a little younger, that one might not work as well, but it's definitely nice and dark in there. And then Carousel of Progress. My husband kind of made fun of me because I wanted to go on Carousel of Progress because it lasts a long time. It's not super loud or crazy. And honestly, I love Carousel of Progress. I think it's so charming and cute and just classic Disney. And my husband thinks it's so lame and boring. He thinks it's like the nap ride. So he was making fun of me, but it was the perfect place to feed the baby. So that worked out really well. And then I did try to feed her on Mickey's PhilharMagic, and that, I guess I had not realized how loud that is. It is so loud, and she would start to eat and then something loud would happen and she'd jump, and it didn't work as well in there. We didn't do like the Tiki Room or the Country Bears Jamboree this time, but those would be great places to feed the baby as well. There's a lot of places in Magic Kingdom. The only crisis, I guess I'll call it, that we had was in the middle of the afternoon. I will say a lot of the issues at Disney happen in the heat of the afternoon. That's why we finally got smart after a couple of days and started taking breaks. But it was about 3:00 p.m. and you'll see why I know that in a minute. The baby was having a meltdown. It was really hot. We were in a sunny area, and I needed to get to a place to feed her as soon as possible. And at this point, we were kind of close to one of the baby care centers. So I was excited. I was like, oh, good, we'll get to use it. So I walk toward it as the baby is completely melting down. I get close to it, and I hear the Festival of Fantasy parade coming, and I see the ropes up, and I literally cried. I had a meltdown too. Just a couple tears, but I was so frustrated because I just needed to feed her. But I ended up finding a really nice quiet spot. So if you go to the Plaza restaurant and kind of towards the back, kind of between that and I believe it's the Tomorrowland Terrace restaurant, there are like some restrooms there. So it's kind of between the Plaza and Tomorrowland. There's just like a little inlet area with kind of like a ledge that you can sit on, and it's in the shade, and there's not very many people there. There were just a couple people sitting and resting. It's just a nice quiet spot. So I was able to sit there and feed the baby. So crisis averted. That was probably the most stress I felt the entire trip. So just make sure you're more prepared than I was, and know when your baby is starting to get hungry. Don't let them get to that point of screaming. So yeah, other than that though, feeding the baby in Magic Kingdom was pretty easy. There were plenty of places. And I did want to mention, I never felt uncomfortable or judged. There were plenty of other moms feeding their babies. And I never felt weird or anything. So yeah, don't worry about that. Epcot was another park that I felt there were a lot of places to feed the baby. There's a couple of longer rides that she can ride. So what am I trying to say? Living with the Land. I fed her on Living with the Land. That one's nice and calm and slow and long. Spaceship Earth. That's another really slow, quiet, peaceful ride. That was plenty long enough for me to feed her. And then we rode Soarin' a few times. And if you're familiar with it, at the exit, there's like a big seating area where families can kind of sit and wait. And the chairs are really comfortable, and some of them have chargers to charge your phone. So I fed her a few times there throughout the day. World Showcase, I did feel was a little bit harder to find shady spots. to feed the baby. I know we didn't go on the American Adventure, but I've never done it before, but I believe it's like a longer show that would probably work. There's also those theaters in like different countries, like the Circle Vision 3D. No, it's not 3D. What am I? 360, I think. I don't know. They're like the countries have different movies. I've never done any of those either. I need to do those, but that probably would have been a good place too. Um, but we didn't end up doing that. I ended up actually like walking and feeding her a couple times. Um, so I'm not as familiar, I guess, with the places and World Showcase. I'm sure there's probably plenty. So if you are familiar and if you have any tips about where to feed your baby in World Showcase, leave a comment below and let us know. But I did feel that there were plenty of places in Future World. Is it still called Future World? I'm not even sure. I know they're redoing everything. I'm not sure if it's still called Future World. Anyway. Oh, there were a couple of areas too for Flower and Garden Festival. There were like some little playgrounds that were set up that aren't normally there, and some like gardens with some seating areas inside. And those were kind of nice too when it was early in the morning or later in the evening. It was a lot of times too hot in the heat of the day, but they were really pretty and peaceful areas. Hollywood Studios didn't have as many rides or really any rides that I could feed her on, but they do have a lot of shows. So I fed her in the Frozen show, the Beauty and the Beast show. The Little Mermaid show wasn't running while we were there, but that would probably be a good one too. Maybe the Disney Junior show. And the launch bay, I'm not sure if that's open now or what. It was open when we were there, but there was like nothing there. So there were plenty of like quiet spots in there that I could sit and feed her. And we were there one of the first weeks of June and it was not very busy. I was expecting it to be busier than it was, but the crowds were really pretty low the first week of June. So at Hollywood Studios, there are a lot of different like restaurants that are outside or food stands. And they have lots of like picnic tables or benches or places to sit. And around Echo Lake, I feel like there's like a ledge that you can sit on in different areas. Maybe not like right around it, but nearby. So we would just kind of find a spot like that to sit every once in a while to feed her. Because I feel like Hollywood Studios has a lot of just like ledges along the sides of the walkways that you can sit on. I guess it might be a different story if it was a little busier, but it wasn't too bad when we were there. And then as far as Animal Kingdom goes, I would say this is probably the hardest park to find a good place to feed her. And I don't know what it was this time, guys, but like I could not deal with the heat at Animal Kingdom this time. I don't know if I'm getting older or if my hormones are just crazy because I'm postpartum or what, but I was so hot. And there's a couple shows that are inside, but not very many. Most of the attractions are outside. Most of the lines are outside. And I was just so hot. And every time I had to feed the baby, it was just so hot getting that cover on. Of course, you wouldn't have to use a cover. I'm just more comfortable using one. But yeah, anyway, that was tough during the trip. Just Animal Kingdom in general. I love Animal Kingdom, but man, I don't want to go again in the summer. I want to go hopefully in the winter next time, like February. Bring me to Animal Kingdom in February. But anyway, I did feed her in the Nemo show, which it was kind of funny. The first day we were there, it wasn't running yet because they like revamped the show. But the second day we were there was actually the second day that it had opened. So that was kind of fun to get to see that. But I fed her in there in the Lion King show. They're kind of louder though, so again, if your baby is distractible, that might not work as much. And then that was the park that, you know, we really needed to use the baby care center a little bit more. Sometimes we would walk out of our way just because it's too hot. It's too hot to be feeding the baby outside, especially there. Why is it so much hotter than the other parks? Like, I know they always say Animal Kingdom is the hottest park, and I think it's just because everything's outside. Why is it hotter? And it's bigger too. I don't know. Let me know. The second thing I wanted to talk about today was Rider Switch. And we used this every day so many times. A couple of the days it was just our little family that was there. And then the second half of our trip, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law were also there. So we would ride in like bigger groups, but please be aware that this is a thing. I don't think that if you go with your baby, you're just going to have to ride all the baby rides or not ride any rides at all. You can still ride pretty much everything. You just have to take turns, like I said. So the way rider switch works is when you go to get on the ride, you have to talk to the cast members. Usually they're like right in the front of the queue, and make sure your whole party is there. Make sure that they can see the baby or the child. And you just tell them that you want to do rider switch, and they'll ask who is riding the first time, who's coming back, and one person can ride twice. So usually that was our daughter. She got to ride most of the rides twice that she wanted to ride, so that's kind of fun. So yeah, your first group goes, and whether you have lightning lane or you go in the standby line, you wait through that line, and then the second group doesn't have to wait through the standby line. So you're cutting your wait time a lot. So don't think you're gonna have to like stand in lines all day. So once that first group rides, the second group gets to go through the lightning lane line. So it's still a little bit of a line, but it's much, much faster. You can usually get on the ride pretty quickly that way. So yeah, our trip would not have been as much fun without that. We used it all the time. And just know too, there are rides at every park that the baby can ride, any baby could ride. At Magic Kingdom definitely has the most. I really liked our Magic Kingdom days because I liked when our whole family could just be together on the rides, but especially in Fantasyland, actually all throughout the park, there are tons and tons of rides that the baby can ride. Epcot, again, there are a lot of rides that the baby can ride. Animal Kingdom, not as many. You can do like the Navi River Journey and the safari ride. It is pretty bumpy, but you can do that. Maybe a couple of other little ones. But there's not a ton. They can't obviously go on like Everest or Flight of Passage, things like that. So we used Rider Switch a lot that day. And then Hollywood Studios it has the least for the baby to ride. We did Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, that one the whole family can ride. I usually had her in her carrier, and I would literally hold her head up because there's a couple parts in that ride where it really throws you around, and her neck is not that strong, or was not that strong yet at 5 months. I was just a little nervous. I'm sure it was fine, or else they wouldn't have let her ride, but I'm not that mom that's overprotective about anything. But anyway, I'm trying to think. Oh, the Toy Story ride. She could also ride that one. But yeah, Hollywood Studios, those are about the only rides she could ride. So we were waiting a lot while the other group was taking their turn at Hollywood Studios. If my husband wasn't such a huge Star Wars fan, and if the rides weren't so amazing, I might say you could skip Hollywood Studios with the baby, but I don't know. I don't think you can skip any of the parks, but that's just me. If you're going to skip a park though, and because you're bringing your baby, Hollywood Studios would be the one that the baby can do the least. Although there's shows, so that's kind of fun too. So anyway, but yes, rider switch, key, definitely. The third area I wanted to talk about was nap time. We were lucky because our baby is not a good sleeper at home. Not at all. Still, at 7 months, I am awake every 2 hours, and nap times are a struggle. But the heat and the overstimulation at Disney kind of worked for us during the trip, because by 8:30 every morning, she was passed out for her first nap. She fell asleep everywhere. Like, she would just, all of a sudden, she'd just drop off. We were in the middle of riding The Little Mermaid, and we looked down, and I'm holding her upright, and she's asleep. So we were lucky in that way. She really did just, when she was tired, she just fell asleep. She just could not stay awake. But I could see that also going the other way, because I know sometimes when the baby gets overtired, they get, their adrenaline starts pumping, and then they can't go to sleep. So this piece of advice is the biggest piece of advice you will hear from anyone, and we've always ignored it because our family goes hard at Disney, and we tried to for the first 2 days. But when you have a baby, you have to take this advice, and that is to go back to your hotel and take a break for a couple hours in the heat of the day. Because even though you might feel like you're missing out, quality time is sometimes so much more valuable than a higher quantity of time. So here's what you do if you want to make the most of your trip, in my opinion. You wake up early, get to the park. If you're staying on site for early entry, get there as early as you can. Those first couple hours, at least when we went, it was almost, I won't say empty, but it was not busy at all. For probably the first 2 hours, it was just like you could almost walk on to everything except maybe at Hollywood Studios and Animal Kingdom. Anyway, so you go early, ride as much as you can in the morning before it gets super hot. And then honestly, you can feel it like around lunchtime or maybe a little after. You can feel it inside of you. You can sense it from the people in your party. You can see it happening all around you. Like everyone starts to melt down. The heat, at least in June, the heat will do that to you. When you start feeling that anxiety, that's your cue. It's time to get out of there, get away from the crowds, get away from the heat, go back to your room, take a nap, take a swim, and then that way the baby can have like a nice, peaceful, cool place to nap. And hopefully they'll nap for a couple hours, get refreshed. And then when it's later in the afternoon, you start heading back, and then you can be there for the evening when the crowds start to die down again and the heat starts to die down. We actually had the best Magic Kingdom day, our second Magic Kingdom day. We got there early and rode so many things early in the morning, went back to our room, came back in the evening, and we closed down the park. The baby fell asleep at like after the fireworks, and she slept the whole time until we got back to our hotel. So we just kind of let our older daughter go crazy, but we stayed till 11, and that last hour, we didn't have to wait for anything. I mean, we weren't going on like the heavy hitter rides, but she was just walking on to attraction after attraction, and it was so much fun. So yes, that break is key, because if you don't take a break, you probably won't last all day. We lasted till like 4 or 5 on the days that we didn't take a break, and the plan had been to stay a lot longer than that. And the last thing I wanted to talk about today was just to talk about some of the things we brought with us outside of the normal baby things. Like obviously you need diapers, wipes, things like that, but these were just the extra things that I thought were helpful, especially in June or in the summertime. I've talked about this in a couple of previous videos, but this fan was really helpful. We actually did get a double stroller, and I know our older daughter is 8, and I almost argued with my husband when he said we needed a double stroller. But listen, don't be a hero. Like I could barely walk as far as I needed to walk every day, let alone my 8-year-old. I think that we had a lot less complaining. She had a place to sit when she needed to rest her feet. This will probably be the last trip we can get away with it, but your older kids, please let them use a stroller. I wish I had a stroller that I could use. But anyway, we had this fan. I kind of wish we had bought 2. Because they would kind of take turns with it, but it hooks right to the stroller, and you can just put it right on the baby. It has a light too, so that was helpful at nighttime. Another thing that helped keep us cool were these cooling towels, which I've also talked about. They come in a pack of 4, and you get them wet and like snap them, and we would wrap them around our neck or put them on our shoulders. And they would keep us all cool, and it was helpful. When I bought them, I was like, is this really gonna help? But it did like a little. It didn't like make us, oh, I'm super cool now or anything like that, but it did help. It brought the temperature down a little bit. But for the baby, her feet, like the bottom half of her legs and her feet would be exposed to the sun because the stroller cover just didn't quite cover that far, and she was too young for sunscreen. So we would just take one of these and kind of drape it over her legs, and it would keep her cool, and it would shield her legs from the sun so she didn't get sunburn. Definitely recommend these. And then another thing, because of the sun, especially when your baby is younger than 6 months and can't use sunscreen yet, a sun hat is, really important. So we use this a lot. And we also have this stroller hook. You can hook it to your stroller, and it's pretty heavy. It's pretty strong. We hooked so many things to this. Let me see. We hooked the cooling towels because they came in these little pouches. We hooked my daughter's book bag. Any souvenirs we bought quite a few, would hook to these. We bought a reusable popcorn bucket that we would hook to this every time because you get, I think, $2 refills. I don't know. Cheap refills. I can't remember. But so we brought that with us every time. And we even have like this big bulky water sprayer fan thing that we bought a couple years ago, which is pretty heavy, and that hooked to this as well. So we just had this big swinging mass hanging from our stroller at all times, but it really did increase the capacity of the stroller. So this was great. And then clear bags for the baby. Well, if you're not bringing a diaper bag, we didn't bring a dedicated diaper bag. We just brought a book bag and we put the baby stuff in there. So we kept like the diapers, changes of clothes, baby food, that type of thing in here. And then we could just grab it and see what we needed easily. One day I tried to put multiple clear bags in my book bag with a couple of different things in it, and it was a bad idea. They just stuck to each other. I couldn't get anything in and out. So maybe just one at a time, but this was great. This was also great for just packing my suitcase. Just to be able to see where everything was. The only other thing I would say is bring the baby carrier if you have one, because the stroller is fantastic, it's great, but if you've ever been to Disney, you know you cannot bring your stroller on pretty much any of the attractions, any of the rides or the shows. There's stroller parking. You have to keep your stroller there, take your baby out, and carry them. And sometimes those rides can't talk. Sometimes those lines can be really long, and to hold the baby for that long, it's hard. So I just wore her a lot in her carrier, and that made it a lot easier. And the one time the Ratatouille ride broke down, and we were there for probably a good 20 to 30 minutes. And we were literally the next ones to get on the ride when it broke down. So I was so glad I had her carrier. She was a little restless, but that was better than having to hold her the whole time. But it worked out because we got to ride the ride twice in a row then. So if the ride ever breaks down and you're the next one that was supposed to ride, usually they let you ride it twice. Just a little side note. And the only last thing I wanted to say is don't forget to get your first visit pin. So we got this at on Main Street. What am I trying to say? I swear, since I had the baby, I have word finding problems. I think it's sleep deprivation. I cannot think of what I'm trying to say, so I will put it on the screen. Anyway, we got one of these. We asked for one. They actually gave us like 5 or 6. I don't know why they gave us so many, but yeah, this will be a souvenir that I'll keep forever. So don't forget to get one of those. So thanks so much for watching. I hope that this was able to give you some advice and some help. I truly hope that if you decide to go to Disney World with your baby, that it's not a stressful time, and that that you just have the best time and make the best memories. And if you're on the fence about bringing a baby, just know it's not that hard. Bringing a toddler is probably so much harder, and I figured if she can't walk and she can't talk, it's got to be easier now. Let's be honest, we're probably going to bring her when she's a toddler too, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. So yeah, if you're on the fence, it's totally worth it. It's a little bit more planning, but totally worth it in the end. We made so many great memories that we will never ever forget. And I know everyone's like, the baby will never remember. No, she won't, but we have the pictures, and the rest of us will remember. My older daughter will have those memories forever. That almost makes me teary-eyed. Too, it was really special for her to bring her little sister. So thank you guys so much for watching. Subscribe if you want to find out more Disney tips, and also just watch me now that our trip is over. And now that summer is over, I am going to be a full-time stay-at-home mom now, and I'm still adjusting. I'm trying to get my life back together after being a working mom that was very stressed out for 8 years. So follow along on that journey as well. So yeah, go ahead and subscribe if you would like to be here for that. Thanks, guys.